A $500 fine. That's all it took. Not a suspension, not a press conference, not a scandal. Just $500 that a league office probably signed off on in about 30 seconds without thinking twice. And that tiny decision ended up handing one player a sold-out t-shirt, a national brand deal, and an actual offer to join professional wrestling from the co-owner of the Los Angeles Lakers. If you think that sounds made up, stick around, because every single piece of it is real, and it all traces back to one player refusing to stay quiet. Her name is Sophie Cunningham, and before any of this exploded, she was just a 7-year veteran who had spent 6 seasons in Phoenix before getting traded to the Indiana Fever right as the whole basketball world turned its attention to one rookie. That rookie was Caitlin Clark, and anyone who's watched sports for more than 5 minutes knows what usually happens when a veteran gets pushed into a supporting role behind a rookie who's suddenly the most famous player in the league. Resentment, tension, a quiet power struggle that plays out over an entire season. That's the normal story. That is not what happened in Indiana. What happened instead is that Cunningham just started protecting her. Not because anyone told her to, not because it was written into some role on the roster. She just did it. Stepping in front of contact, putting a hand out after a hard foul, putting her body where it needed to be so someone else didn't have to take the hit. None of it was flashy. None of it went viral on its own. But fans who were actually watching closely noticed the pattern building for months before the rest of the sports world caught on. Then came June 17th, and everything changed in about 8 seconds. Indiana was playing Connecticut. Clark had already taken a shot to the eye earlier in the game. One of those plays that gets a little attention and then just gets absorbed into the chaos of a physical basketball game with no real consequence. She was still playing through it when things escalated, and Cunningham didn't wait around for a whistle that clearly wasn't coming. She grabbed the Connecticut player involved, took her to the floor, and accepted the ejection without blinking. Both players were tossed with under a minute left. The game kept going. The internet did not. Within 24 hours, Cunningham had picked up something like 500,000 new followers across TikTok and Instagram combined. Her jersey sales spiked. Her name started trending completely on its own, with no box score attached to it at all. And here's the part that actually explains why it hit so hard. This wasn't some random burst of internet attention out of nowhere. It was frustration that had been quietly building around the league for weeks, finally finding something solid to attach itself to. Because coaches had been complaining about officiating all season. Indiana's own head coach had publicly pointed out that basically every part of the game seemed to be improving except how the referees were calling it. Other coaches around the league said versions of the same thing in post-game interviews. Always careful, always a little coded, but the message was clear if you were paying attention. So when Cunningham grabbed someone and hit the floor rather than waiting for officials to do something, she wasn't just defending a teammate. She was answering a question a lot of fans had been quietly asking for weeks. Is anybody actually going to do something about this? Turns out yes. And it was a player most casual fans hadn't even heard of a month earlier. Then the league decided to respond to her instead of the officiating problem. And that's where this whole thing tips from a regional story into a national one. Late July, Cunningham posts a video lip-syncing to a Sabrina Carpenter lyric. Something along the lines of stupid, or is it slow? Maybe it's useless. And tags some referees in the caption. No names, no direct accusation, just a sarcastic little jab wrapped around a trending sound, the kind of clip that gets posted 100 times a day and forgotten instantly. Except this one got over 1 million views within days, and somehow the league decided this required an official response. The fine came in at $500. In professional sports, that number is basically nothing. It's the kind of thing that's supposed to get paid quietly and disappear before it even makes the news cycle. But Cunningham wasn't going to let that happen. She posted about it herself, and the tone wasn't angry. It wasn't even really defensive. It almost sounded amused, like someone who called exactly this outcome and found it funny that the league had proven her right so quickly. She said she got fined $500 for a TikTok, that she found it kind of funny, and maybe the league had bigger things to worry about. Then she moved on. Nobody else did. Fans jumped into the replies offering to cover the fine themselves. Jokes started flying about a league punishing a player for pointing out a real problem while the problem itself sat untouched. And somewhere in the middle of all that noise, the entire story quietly flipped. It wasn't a story about bad officiating anymore. It became a story about someone getting punished for noticing bad officiating out loud. That's a completely different narrative, and it's a much stickier one, because now there's a villain in the story, not just a bunch of frustrated fans yelling into the void. And that fine didn't exist in a vacuum either. Around the same time, 2 New York players got a fine warning just for wearing hats on the sideline during a game they weren't even active for because of injury. Nothing close to unsportsmanlike conduct in either situation, yet both drew formal attention from the league, while the officiating issue that coaches had been flagging all season somehow never got the same urgency. Fines for hats. Fines for sarcastic lip syncs. Silence on the actual calls being missed. That pattern fed directly into a perception that was already forming among fans, that the league's priorities were pointed in exactly the wrong direction. There's one more detail that made this fire almost impossible to put out. The league didn't usually publish fines itself. They only became public when a player chose to share them, meaning the whole system ran on a kind of quiet secrecy that worked fine as long as everyone stayed quiet. Cunningham broke that. She made the fine visible. She turned it into a receipt, a specific, undeniable data point in an argument fans were already winning. And by doing that, she wasn't just speaking for herself anymore. She gave every frustrated fan across the league something concrete to point at. That $500 fine was supposed to send a message telling her to cool it. Instead, it did the exact opposite, and she wasn't finished yet. Barbie Night at the Fever's Arena was supposed to be exactly what it sounds like. Pink lights, themed giveaways, a fun promotional night that gets a few posts and good vibes before everyone moves on with their lives. Cunningham showed up in a plain white t-shirt that read "Hot Girls Eat Arby's," paired with black leather shorts. No big styling moment. No explanation needed. The photo hit the internet within minutes and spread instantly. What made this land the way it did wasn't just the shirt, it was the backstory behind it. Back in April, she'd posted a video trying Arby's for the first time on camera, and it went quietly viral because her reaction felt completely real, not like someone performing enthusiasm for a paycheck. That video laid the groundwork. By the time the shirt showed up on Barbie Night, Arby's had clearly been watching her account closely for months, and they moved fast. They reposted the photo, called her an unapologetic queen, and basically named her a brand ambassador in real time in front of an audience who had no idea it was coming. It felt spontaneous because a lot of it genuinely was, but the groundwork, the pre-existing relationship, the primed audience, none of that happened by accident. The shirt sold out in every size within about 2 days. No campaign, no months of planning, no scripted commercial. A player wore a shirt she thought was funny. A brand recognized the moment and leaned into it instead of ignoring it. And the result was exactly the kind of authentic marketing companies spend millions trying to manufacture and almost never actually pull off. And the timing wasn't lost on anyone either. That shirt showed up just days after the TikTok fine. A fine that was supposed to make her more cautious, more careful about drawing attention from the league. Instead, she walked straight into a nationally covered event wearing something guaranteed to keep the story rolling even further. By this point, her endorsement list had grown well beyond basketball. Apparel, skincare, sparkling water, a bank, a supplement brand, a well-known shapewear label. A wide enough spread that it stopped looking like one lucky opportunistic deal and started looking like a bunch of brands independently arriving at the same conclusion, that this player felt real, generated genuine attention, and had an audience that actually responded to her instead of scrolling past. None of them needed her to be the top scorer on her team. They just needed her to be believable, and believable was exactly what she'd spent the whole season proving she was. Then came the part nobody saw coming. San Diego Comic-Con, a wrestling panel with no obvious connection to basketball whatsoever. The founder of Women of Wrestling is on stage talking, and out of nowhere he brings up Sophie Cunningham by name. He says he'd been watching the Fever closely that season and walked away convinced she belonged in a wrestling ring. Then he reached for a specific comparison, calling her the enforcer to Caitlin Clark's Superstar, using an old hockey analogy about the tough guy who skated alongside Wayne Gretzky, absorbing hits and delivering them, so the star of the team never had to. The comparison landed exactly the way he wanted it to. Sitting right next to him on that panel was Jeanie, the controlling owner of the Los Angeles Lakers and co-owner of that same wrestling promotion. She didn't let the moment pass quietly either. She posted publicly saying the promotion would love to have Cunningham join them, calling her talented, dedicated, and a fierce competitor. That's not a random off-the-cuff joke at a convention panel. That's a public recruitment message from one of the biggest ownership names in American sports, with zero ambiguity about how serious it was. So why would an NBA franchise owner publicly go after a WNBA player for professional wrestling? Once you've followed her whole season, it stops being surprising. She'd become, through instinct more than any planned strategy, exactly the kind of crossover personality pro sports almost never produces. Physical, outspoken, completely comfortable with confrontation, totally unbothered by attention no matter where it came from or how much of it hit at once. Those traits translate everywhere, not just on a basketball court, in any arena where presence and being real matter more than technical polish. And this wasn't some novelty offer either, because the promotion itself had actual infrastructure behind it, running for over 2 decades with hundreds of episodes and real streaming deals. This was an established company with real reach, extending a genuine invitation to a player they actually believed fit their world. And she wasn't faking interest either. On the first episode of her own podcast that same summer, she talked about growing up watching wrestling with the kind of specific, unscripted enthusiasm that's genuinely hard to fake, naming old-school legends with real affection, the kind that comes from actually watching as a kid, not from a media briefing sheet. That history gave the whole offer real credibility. This wasn't a famous athlete getting dangled in front of an unfamiliar industry for a one-time publicity stunt. This was a lifelong fan getting invited into something she'd genuinely loved since childhood. Her response was carefully worded in a way that kept every door open without committing to anything. She told a reporter she would not be interested in exploring it once the season wrapped up. That kind of intentional double negative kept the speculation alive without giving anyone anything to actually use against her or turn into a distraction from the basketball she was still playing at the time. By the time that wrestling story hit the news cycle, she had completely stopped being a side character in someone else's story. She'd become the story herself, and the fine the league issued weeks earlier to quiet her down had, by every measurable outcome, done the exact opposite. Step back and look at the whole shape of this season, and the pattern gets impossible to miss. Every single time the league tried to manage her through a financial punishment, that punishment generated more attention than the original moment ever would have on its own. $400 for the ejection, $500 for the sarcastic lip sync, $1,500 more for comments on her own podcast, each one small on its own. Together they built a story the league never meant to write, that their most protective, most outspoken, most genuinely engaged player kept getting penalized for exactly the things her fans loved most about her. That's a brutal narrative to accidentally build about yourself, and there was no clean way to walk it back once it had already taken shape. The league's whole approach to handling player behavior was built for a completely different media environment. Quietly find someone, control the message, move on before the story picks up steam. That plan works fine when players have limited direct access to their audience and depend on league-approved channels just to be heard at all. It falls apart completely when the player being fined has a massive following, a phone in her hand, and the instinct to post the exact dollar amount publicly before the league communications team has even finished drafting a statement. She didn't invent this dynamic. She just existed inside it more comfortably and more quickly than the league knew how to handle. Other players noticed too, because her approach, transparent, a little self-deprecating, completely public, offered a blueprint that didn't require anger or manufactured drama to actually work. She turned getting fined into content, and content delivered consistently to an audience that's already invested compounds in a way a quiet apology behind closed doors never will. Underneath all of it, the officiating frustration was never really just her issue. Coaches across the league had been raising the same concerns all season, carefully enough to avoid getting fined themselves, but consistently enough that the pattern was impossible to miss if you were paying attention. What her fines ended up doing, in a way that must have been deeply uncomfortable for the league office, is give all that scattered frustration one single visible lightning rod. Fans everywhere who'd been irritated by officiating for months suddenly had one concrete story to point to and one player to rally behind. The fines didn't create that sentiment. They organized it. There's a question sitting underneath this whole story that nobody in the league office has really answered, and probably never will. Was there a version of this season where fixing the officiating problem earlier made all of this simply not happen? Almost certainly yes. A player can't become the physical symbol of fan frustration about missed calls if the calls aren't being missed in the first place. A sarcastic TikTok aimed at referees doesn't hit over 1 million views in a league where officiating is broadly seen as fair and consistent. The entire infrastructure for her rise wasn't something she built herself. It was built by a problem the league had and simply didn't prioritize fixing. $500 is a rounding error in financial terms. Set it against the endorsement interest it helped generate, the follower growth it accelerated, the brand deals it indirectly made possible, and an actual wrestling offer from the co-owner of one of the most famous sports franchises in the country, and the math genuinely stops making sense. The league basically spent $500 buying her entire next chapter. Think for a second about what this season would have looked like under a different set of choices. A quiet apology after the ejection. A private phone call instead of a public post about the fine. A carefully scrubbed social media presence with nothing that could be read as criticism of the league. Every one of those choices was available to her. Every single one of them would have made her less visible, not more. Every one of them would have starved the exact moments that turned her into one of the most talked about personalities in the entire sport this season. She chose otherwise almost every time. Not because of some calculated master plan, at least not one that seems engineered in any formal sense, but out of instinct, out of an actual willingness to say what she thought, take whatever consequence came with it, and find the whole thing a little ridiculous in a way her audience found completely irresistible. A sold-out shirt. A national brand deal announced in real time in front of millions of people who had no idea it was coming. An open invitation into professional wrestling from one of the most powerful names in American sports ownership. A fan base that got louder and more loyal every single time the league tried to quiet her down. All of it traceable back to one $500 fine that somebody in an office almost certainly assumed would just disappear by Tuesday afternoon. It never disappeared. It hasn't stopped coming up since. And she never set out to become a case study in how athletes handle institutional power in the social media era. She just refused to stay quiet while watching her teammate absorb hits nobody was calling, said something about it, got fined for saying it, and then said something about that too. That instinct, honest, stubborn, a little amused by the absurdity of her own situation, is exactly what built a level of loyalty no brand deal or wrestling contract could ever fully explain on its own. And if the league is paying any attention at all, that instinct might be the single most important thing to understand about where women's basketball is heading next.